believe it or not,
We're here.
we're here.
Season
here?
3.
Yes. So thanks for being in one of the longest relationships I've ever had. I greatly appreciate you, because I can be a lot.
It's good to be back. It's good to be back on campus.
I mean, it's good to be back, kind of. Like, I wish
Yeah.
there was like another week or two,
Okay.
just because, sometimes your summer plans don't go the way you want them to, and that
True,
was
true.
my summer.
Ooh.
So I wish I would have had just like 1 or 2 more weeks where I could have just like settled down, got some of the stuff that I didn't get done. But
Yeah.
it's fine. Like, we're back. It's like the reality.
Yeah.
Gotta deal with it.
The part that I love is that there are students back. So
yes.
I don't feel so lonely when I walk down the corridor. The place is humming. There's the sense of activity. This is why we exist. I mean, we do research, we do service, but students is why we're
The
here.
majority of my time is
Yes.
students, right? Like, is teaching. So, yeah, welcome to season 3 of Not That Kind of Doctor. I'm Nick Huseby. I'm an associate professor here at UNL.
And I'm Guy Trainin, a professor here at Teaching, Learning, and Teacher Education at UNL.
Oh, gotta show me up, don't ya?
Yes, I did.
Also, like, I'm just impressed with how easy that came back. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I have to do an intro, right?
Yes.
Certain things just don't go away. So, we're here to talk about how you spent your summer vacation. Just a quick little catch up.
So, going back to our summer episode, vacation is not the word I would use for myself. I have taught quite extensively. I had 2 very intensive weeks of teaching. So there's the ramp up into teaching, there's teaching, and after that there was a lot of research happening, so a lot of writing, which was great because there are concentrated blocks of time where you can sit and write, which is considerably better. And there are a number of manuscripts that I'm working on with others. So it was a good time to also find, it's easier in the summer to find joint times if we want to, and if everybody is focused on that, and we can get a lot more done because we remember what we did last time, and you're not always going back and remembering. So a few manuscripts got done. I went to 2 conferences, which was delightful but also stressful. Summer conferences in Las Vegas, probably not the best choice because you felt like you were literally incinerated every time you stepped out of.
It's like a wall of heat. Like,
Yes.
you hit this wall of heat.
Yes. And so that was an experience, to say the least. I don't remember being, since I came here, so when I moved to Nebraska from California, we drove through Vegas because we were in Southern California. And I think that's the last time I ever was in Vegas in the summer.
Oof.
That's 22 years ago. So, it has not gotten any better.
No.
I think a little worse.
Well,
but
and it's only going to get worse,
Yes.
according to any like news programming that you watch or
although
read.
I don't know if we can really tell the difference between 110 and 115 or 120.
I don't want to find
don't know.
out.
Yeah.
That's not a question that I'm particularly interested in answering.
Yes, so I did those things, and then I wrote a grant that eventually had to be scrapped. So that was a lovely experience.
Okay.
And then I spent time with my granddaughter. So
As
I
one
have a
does.
new granddaughter, and whenever the opportunity came, we spent time together, and that was lovely. So
Delightful.
yes,
Mazel.
it is. Thank you.
Huh. Yeah, it sounds like you had it sounds like your summer went kinda to plan.
Yes, although my plans are always looser than yours, and so
the shade.
no shade. I just kind of a little bit go with the flow, and so there was more room to maneuver and see who wants to participate. I did have 2 doctoral students working with me all summer, so that helps as well, and that creates commitments and a series of approachable goals. But we actually met writing goals. I think for the first time in our life, we actually had a date and we submitted by
Nice.
the date, and that was a lot of work, and we got there. So
That's
very
awesome.
happy. Yes.
Because I did have a fairly substantial plan for my summer, but alas, dear viewer, he met none of them. So yeah, this summer was a little bit of a wash for me. Not necessarily a wash, like things got done, but I started the summer with, I tore my tendon,
Yeah.
which was weird. According to urgent care, I was walking while old, which was also 3 days before my birthday.
Yeah, that's
And
a sign.
so I was like, oh, does that really, what? Oh, it hurt. It hurt, both
In multiple
mentally
ways.
and physically. But thankfully, it was a tendon tear that
Mm-hmm.
tore like you part curtains, not like a tear. So I didn't need surgery. That was great, but it was a lot of like, boots are not fun. Boots are not great. They're not entertaining
Yeah.
at all.
No.
But they do fit in luggage, which can get lost
Oh my God.
while
Because
you're
you
traveling.
decided to travel while hurt.
I traveled while booted.
Yeah.
And then like on day 3 was like, I'm not about this life, and just trained myself to walk without the boot, which was fine. Doctor said I could
Good.
do that. It was with it. Like they were like, you can do that for like half an hour.
Oh.
And I was like 16 miles later. But it healed fairly well. Like I
Good.
have a knot. I've got some tendon tape. So like my trip to Europe was great. Had to deal with the tendon
great.
at first. Trip to Europe was great. Came back, and then like life stuff happened. Like sometimes it's not even work related. It's just out of left field, and you have to deal with some stuff, and stuff gets shifted around, and your bandwidth just gets minimized. So like I've canned some tomatoes, I've made some jam, I've done a little bit of writing.
All the important things.
I read some books. I taught a class. ChatGPT made that class really hard.
Why?
Because if you're going to, as a student, submit a reflection essay, and your reflection essay is coming from ChatGPT, and you've done no work
Editing. Yeah.
to ensure that the essay is actually applicable to the thing that you're supposed to be reflecting upon, that just makes more work for me. Right? So that notion of like, oh, I'm going to do ChatGPT and whatever product it gives me is going to be fine. So it felt like I taught less about children's literature and more about
AI.
this is how you use ChatGPT to do this. Like, this is fine
Yeah.
if you want to use this as a first draft, but it's a first draft.
Yes.
You have to go back and fill in the detail because the ChatGPT doesn't know that. And so therefore it looks like you didn't read the book. You didn't do anything.
Yeah, and
You
my
know, so-
my favorite AI comment was somebody who was talking about AI, and I don't remember who it is, so I'm sorry for not referencing. Maybe if I find it, we'll put it in the show notes. But she talked about the fact that she needed to give a talk at church or synagogue or something. And she wanted to do something inspirational. So what she did is she went to ChatGPT and she gave specifics. And then she wrote exactly not that. So she said, if this is what ChatGPT gets me, then anybody has access to that. And that has been repeated so many times. I want to have a different angle about this that isn't ChatGPT inspired. So it's like finding ChatGPT and saying, not this, as a way to use ChatGPT.
Right. Well, and so that was the teaching piece. That was a little like kooky. I've already thought through how I'm going to revise it for the next summer. So, I mean, summer, later today, I have to sit down and like plan out what I'm doing with this current semester. And so I'm going to kind of do a laundry list of like, here's what didn't get done. Here's what you did do. So it wasn't a complete wash, but it definitely did not go as planned. There were just too many things that I could not plan for.
Yeah. And those are bound to happen. And summer is a good time for them to happen.
I mean, summer isn't okay. I would rather they not happen at all.
Yeah.
You know, and part of what that forced me to realize is during the school year, during the academic year, I think part of what happens is we were talking about bottlenecks before we started shooting, and I think sometimes the intensity of what we have to do during the academic year puts off other stuff, and so in the summer, it's like
Kind of train wrecks
it's like
into it. Yeah.
also to call back to a conversation we had before camera, which makes no sense. So I'm going to try to explain this as best as I can. Dan, chime in if I'm going to miss this, because I'm going to bring it back to a metaphor.
Okay.
But it's kind of like during the academic year, you are that roll of Pillsbury cinnamon buns that you have to twist and then they explode.
So summer is when you explode?
And so summer is like sometimes when you're like, oh, I have time to do things, that's the twist. And it just explodes everywhere and it just creates problems. Like
Yes.
you're under pressure all academic year, and then once you have kind of the time and the space to do some other stuff, the twist happens and it goes whoop.
Yes. And
And
it
so-
fills all the space.
And it fills all the space, and it's also like those cinnamon buns are never as pretty as they say they should be, which is disappointing. But you know, whatever. So one of my actual goals for this academic year is to be thinking about where are the spaces where I can relieve some of those pressures, whether it's physical pressure, because like my
Yeah.
tendon tear was because I wasn't taking care of myself as well physically as I should have been.
Yeah.
So how do I do that a little bit better, et cetera, et cetera. So that's got me into some of the goals that I'm setting for myself
Yeah.
for this upcoming semester.
And part of what I'm doing this semester is working with graduate students who are teaching. And there's about 5 of them. And one of the things that I preempted is like, when you're planning the semester, how can we plan that you have time to think, time to be, and because you're graduate students, you're not just teaching a class or 2, you're also supposed to make progress. How do you make sure that this teaching is part of your time and does not swallow all of your time? And all the decisions around them, and give them license to rethink what they're doing instead of taking somebody else's syllabus and then adding 5 things. And I'm like, this is not
doesn't
going to
work.
work out. This barely works for whoever that person is. Or somebody else, one of our other colleagues. But you can't take somebody else's syllabus and add to it because they don't have room in their syllabus. They do a fantastic job. So if you're doing 100% and you add another 20%.
What are you saying about my syllabus here, guy?
What am I saying? Your syllabus is full. That is, you do not have a clear minute in your syllabus, which is fine. You want to
no.
use, you want to teach.
I'd like to revise.
Yeah.
To revise that. I make good use of
Every
every
minute.
minute that I
Yeah.
am given as an
Yes.
educator, because one, students are paying for that. Students are
Yes.
taking on enormous amounts of debt to be teachers, and so it's my responsibility to make sure that I'm giving them a quality product.
For sure.
But I've also been doing this
Yes.
for a very long time.
Exactly.
And so like I know where I know where the efficiencies are.
Absolutely. And also, taking that, and you couldn't add another 20% to that with 3 new assignments or 4 new assignments. It would be too much.
No, and actually, I took away, like I'm teaching Lit Block again this summer or this fall, and one of the things that I did was I reduced assignments and actually moved toward, in the age of like ChatGPT, I don't want to have to do what I did with children's literature and like reverse engineer these things.
Yes.
And so I've gone to oral exams,
Okay.
which has been,
Yes.
which is going to be really interesting. It's the first time I'm playing around with it, and we'll see how that works. But yeah, it's that notion of like we don't have infinite time to teach, and all of the discourse around teaching is, oh, you do whatever you can to help. No, I will be a learner-centered instructor, but I need my students to be learning-centered students.
Yes.
Right? So there has to be that combination because neither of us has unlimited resources.
Absolutely, and that mirrors the discussions I've had. It's like you cannot take full responsibility as the instructor for everything that happens. Students must take responsibility, and that has to be part of the plan and made explicit to them. Here are the expectations. Right. This is the amount of time. You've taught me this. Talk explicitly. This is the amount of out-of-class time this is going to take. Mm-hmm. You have to think about your life, you have to think about your priorities, and you've got to make sure there's enough time if your goal is to become a teacher. Right. This is what it's going to take. And so, yes, there's a lot of planning. I think we'll get back to ideas around planning throughout because we always discuss how do you plan and how do you reach your goals and how do you give yourself grace to not meet your goals if life comes in the middle. And I love that idea of the slow release, making sure there's enough. In the grant that we have, we talk about having enough air. Mm-hmm. So things can develop and things have time and it's not always pressure because it's really easy to put ourselves under constant pressure. It's part of our culture, it's the hustle, it's all of that. We gotta make sure there's enough room for us to be and not just to wait breathlessly for summer because that's really not productive.
No, that's not productive at all. Because once you hit summer, it does feel like, your structure or your all that pressure just kind of explodes or lets go, and then you kind of fall apart. And that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to avoid.
All right.
So that kind of loops into what did you read this summer?
Well,
that made you happy, that you've been thinking about, or didn't make you happy. Maybe you have a book or two that you didn't.
I have a few books that I dumped in the middle because it was just not interesting enough. I did read Kara Swisher's Burn book, which I enjoyed. It was very short, which I appreciated. Mm-hmm. I like her voice when she writes, and kind of the view, the more realistic view of tech, not anti, not for, just like this is what it is. Mm-hmm. And so I enjoyed that very much. I went back to reading Annie Duke's Thinking in Bits. It's a book I go back to every few years. Every 2-3 years, I go back to it. I think it's a delightful book. Psychology, doctoral student turned poker player turned author, and then she went back to finish her PhD, which was interesting. Oh. Now, I think she wrote the second book. I didn't get to it, but I do like that book because it talks about risk, taking risk. Nate Silver just came out with his book.
I was just going to say, that feels very Nate Silver-esque.
Yes, but she's a better writer than Nate. No shade on Nate. I really like Nate Silver, but he tends to ponder too much and go to extremes in some ways that I don't appreciate, and it's just too long. Thinking in Bets was shorter. I mean, there's a point where, okay, we get your point, let's move on. Mm-hmm. Do we need all of these extra chapters? And so I loved, for example, The Signal and the Noise, but could have had five more less chapters and I would have been fine with it. The point would have been made. So I read those two, and then Nicked, which was a delightful mystery. Okay. On stealing the corpse of Saint Nick's. Based on a true story. It's delightful.
That's actually on my TV Red pile.
Yes. So that's it's a short, quick, delightful read. And then China Rich Girl, which is the continuation for Crazy Rich Asians.
I have not dealt in any of that.
I find how fascinating it is to be fascinated by rich people and their crazy endeavors. So I found that delightful.
Okay, well.
I'm going to read the next one, but I'm starting to think about how many of these do I read before I'm kind of, okay, I get it. But right now I'm having fun, so I'm 100% in. I'm all in.
Well, it's kind of like, I think the closest book I've gotten to like a rich, crazy Asians was Pineapple Street. Jennifer, what is her name? Her last name? It'll come to me.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting take on the, like, I find that I'm not in love with, okay, you're over-resourced. Let's make up a problem. You know, like, it's just not, it doesn't pull me. But Pineapple Street was interesting in its take on that. It was it was a different space, but I feel like I read maybe more. So have you read The Anxious Generation?
No, I'm not interested in those things. I always find the arguments ridiculous and probably should be best summarized by 2 to 3 pages. And so I'm like, do I need to read a full story on that, or can I read the back jacket and move on with my life?
I mean, I don't know that you can with this one. Like Jonathan Haidt, yes, there's some things that are not necessarily backed up. Like some of the argumentation is a little bit weaker than other bits.
Yes.
But I found it fascinating in how he constructs this argument about what technology has done to our ability to kind of tolerate anxiety, and how caregivers' interactions with technology, keeping in mind that like technology is cheaper than childcare. Like you can get an iPad for a fixed amount, and give it to your kid, and you can get stuff done. And parenting is hard. I totally get that. Like that is, in our current context, how you may have to do that, but what are kind of the costs of that, right? Like what happens when we live in this embodied world? One of his arguments is that we live in this embodied world, but kids, because they live in these virtual worlds so early and so often and for such long periods of time, don't know what to do in those embodied worlds.
Yes.
Necessarily, and it's this idea of convenience and how caregivers do so much to shield kids from anything that could be considered dangerous, quote unquote, and how that definition of danger gets mitigated with technology, and around how anxiety is not necessarily a bad thing in particular measure. Like when is it kind of appropriate to feel anxiety versus when are you just feeling anxiety for anxiety's sake because you can't roll with a punch, right? Because in a virtual world, most things play out in an algorithmic space, and so that makes sense. So it was an interesting read.
Yeah. And
it was a lot about caregivers and particularly children, but it was also interesting from like for a me perspective, like living in the moment that I did. Like I didn't grow up in social media. It wasn't everywhere.
Yeah.
I was a beta user of Twitter. I was like one of the first 100 people. I don't use it anymore for multiple reasons. But like, it's interesting what's happened as the social media has just kind of exploded.
And I think about it. So one is, I do want to mention the most both annoying and delightful podcast that I listen to, that I started listening to this summer, which connects to that.
If Books Could Kill.
If Books Could Kill.
Yeah, I do like If Books Could Kill.
Although they sometimes go too far, and in their critique, and one of their complaints is that these authors do not check their work sometimes. However, they don't check their work either. So it's just like...
It's a vicious cycle.
It's a vicious cycle where you're saying things that actually aren't true in critique of books that also make mistakes. I have two thoughs that always get me riled up against some of these. I hate generational arguments. This thing about Generation Alpha versus this versus that. And this stems from the fact that we all struggle, for example, with social media. Is it really that much worse for teens? Maybe, but I think for people in their 20s, I don't think it's any better, right? And so I am interested in that aspect of that as well. So I'm finding the generational argument the weakest piece there, right? I do find that technology has some danger to it, and there's certain things we know about it that I would definitely agree. I don't think it necessarily needs exactly that book. The second piece is that I'm really interested in what's happening in other places. Mm-hmm. And I have a Nigerian collaborator, Japheth, who's delightful. And the context, there's a lot of technology in Nigeria. Mm-hmm. And a lot of scams that emerge from Nigeria. And he's very interested with some of sociologists in at his university in looking at how that interacts, how that changes relationship. So, and what I'm saying is Nigeria is an example, and there are lots of other things happening there. But it's a very different environment, and many other things are happening there. So I am interested in those international comparisons and what we can learn there. Mm-hmm. And that's something I'm just finding being stuck in our own context, in our own, mm-hmm. This is true of continental United States and not even all of it.
Well, but, okay, so 2 points. Now that we're turning this into a technology and anxiety thing.
Yes.
One, I think that there's the generational argument, right, is more about packaging and how that works, right? It's easier to think about evolution of technology and impacts on people in terms of generation. Does that necessarily mean it's a unit of analysis, right? Rather than an argument about any particular generation. And I think back to the research around Facebook and its impact on particularly, middle grade teenage girls, mm-hmm. where it was very, very clear that it was not beneficial, that it actually did harm. And that was solid, right?
Yes.
So I mean, I think when it's Gen Z versus Gen X versus Gen Alpha, like, I don't care. Like, that stuff doesn't make any sense to me. But as I'm thinking about the evolution of what parenting looks like, of what caregiving looks like, mm-hmm. and what becomes acceptable and what doesn't, I think that's where that packaging becomes somewhat helpful, right? And then I lost my second point. What was my second point? Shoot, should have written it down. Third day of the first week of teaching, and I'm already my brain is already melting. But it's been really, really interesting to help think through just my own use of technology and
yes,
how,
for sure.
Thinking about it as tool, not stressor, has been really, really important. The second book that I read this summer, to go back to it, was Cal Newport's Slow Productivity, which was also delightful.
Okay.
Some parts of it, I mean, Cal Newport, deep work.
Yeah. I needed to write the next book.
He needed to write the next book, right? But there were
had a contract.
There were really some interesting things around. I didn't like it as much as I liked Happier Hour.
Okay.
But I really thought his focus in on. I loved how he talked about limitations. I loved how he talked about, look, you don't have unlimited time. You don't have unlimited resources. So when I'm talking about slow productivity, I am talking about, there's a quote.
He's got a quote.
I got quotes. Give yourself enough time to produce something great, but not unlimited time. Focus on creating something good enough to catch the attention of those whose taste you care about, but relieve yourself of the need to forge a masterpiece. Progress is what matters, not perfection. Which, I love when folks talk about and recognize the fact that you only have 24 hours in a day, right? You only have 7 days in a week. You only have so much energy to give any particular thing. Augustine Burroughs has the line. It's out of is it Magical Thinking or the one that came after it? But like, perfection is a satin-lined casket of productivity, of like progress. And so it didn't feel like I took a ton of actionable stuff out of slow productivity, but it really helped me think through some of the philosophies around how I'm thinking about my time, how I'm thinking about my energy. And this is where that conversation around the pressure release has come out of. So I really enjoyed him. And then fiction-wise.
That's the important stuff.
Fiction-wise,
Yeah.
the important stuff. I kind of have fallen in love with Franz Fallada, who is a German writer
Okay.
coming out of late 30s through the 40s, so World War II era. And I discovered him talking to a bookseller in Berlin. And he is writing about Germany as Hitler's coming to power and the spaces for and what the history of what led to Hitler's rise to power, and then what is happening in Germany as Hitler's in power I found to be some really powerful ways. So the first book that I read from him was Alone in Berlin, and it's told in a couple of different parallel stories. This couple in Berlin, their son has just died at the front lines, and keep in mind this is like 1930, late 1930s, early 40s. The dad decides to leave postcards across the city with anti-Hitler sentiments on it. And then what it ends up turning into is this cat and mouse game between the between the between the Secret Service and this couple, and it was just fascinating, both from a historical standpoint, but also just the writing was good.
Yeah,
I really
it's got to
enjoyed
be
the
well
writing.
written. Yeah.
You know, so it was 500 pages, but it felt like it was 2.
Yeah.
Right? So it was just one of those. It was probably my best fiction read for
the
this
summer.
particular summer. So 2 books that were helpful in terms of thinking through some stuff, and one book that I thought was painful at times, but like just super enjoyable. I liked it a lot. So
Okay, that's great. So, what are you excited about for this semester?
So I'm excited about. I'm continuing some work around learning, particularly for adult learners. One of the things that I did manage to get done this summer was I did a lot of work around executive function for particularly young adults, thinking a bit about anxiety, obviously anxious generation, but also thinking about like, what does it mean when you decentralize this idea of being a good learner from your identity construct, and learning is something you do versus something you are.
Yeah.
And rethinking my course to push forward that idea of when you learn, you make mistakes. When you learn, you don't always know it all. When you learn, there are these spaces where, oh shoot, I don't know that. And how do I now know that better? And then thinking through ways that I, as an instructor, can support them in building up these kind of executive function pieces around how do you delegate your time? How do you align your time with your goals? And where is that appropriate? And when can you like slough off, right? The difference between what is self-care and what is self kind of, when are you just doing something because it feels good, right? Like
Self-indulgence?
That's the word I was looking for. still off of coffee. I only still get like 1 cup a day, and it's driving me crazy. And I don't think as well.
Yes.
I've noticed this.
Yes.
Arg, Invisalign, you're killing me. So I'm excited to see how that works. I've made some really specific moves
Yeah.
in my teaching, and I'm curious about how they're going to work out for students. Because again, that's what we're here for. Like I want them to move into their next reading center class really well prepared to teach that student. I want them to be in their practicum and be able to like notice what is happening there. So I'm really excited to see how that plays out, to see how that works, particularly this semester.
Excellent.
So yeah, it should be good. Or it won't be. I'm playing around with it.
Yes.
Students could be like, why did you do that? Like, why does every article have a video introduction of what you want us to pay attention to? That doesn't make any sense.
I think they
seem to
appreciate
like them,
it.
Dan.
though.
What are you excited about?
I'm excited about a few things. One is that the work I've been doing over the last few years around arts integration, using journaling, and a few other things is really starting to show. So we're getting some students' results, and we're getting to publication on a number of pieces. We just submitted one. We've got 3 more that are in process. So this is really exciting to be able to share that. We've been sharing at conferences, and that's been great. But this is leaving that mark that would stay there for a while, instead of I've talked to 30 people who were really excited about it and maybe they'll remember when they get home, to being able to reach a wider audience. The second thing is this is the fall of AI for me. I've got 3 separate
hold on.
presentations.
There's 2 ways to read that. The fall of AI versus
the fall
of AI.
Like the September through December of AI, I'm doing a lot of work
Intonation
on
matters.
AI.
Fluency
Yes.
matters.
And so, and maybe the fall of AI, but we're all grappling with it. But I'm keynoting in Singapore about AI in
Oh, you
education.
just dropped that so casually. I'm
Yes.
keynoting in Singapore.
Yes. And I'm talking about the paper we have about AI in teacher education in Finland, and going to a few other conferences around AI. So I'm really excited about that. A few publications are coming out about AI. One came out yesterday.
Nice, congrats.
So that's delightful. There's a series of collaborations. And the thing I'm excited about is we're not just talking about AI, but we're also working with AI scientists to develop our own models, to do some work inside education, not borrowing from a ChatGPT, so not just an API using the existing models, but actually trying to create specific models that will work separately. So first of all, they don't get owned by whoever is looking to make trillions of dollars. But instead will be owned by the public. And the second piece is to have them designed specifically for education. So without all the brouhaha of we've got to swallow all the information out there to create a model that then will make us money. It's not going to make us money, and we don't need that much information. We can create small models that know what we're looking for and are helpful inside education, and also while protecting teachers and students and families from just sharing their information with the universe. So that's what I'm excited about.
Just moving toward the singularity, aren't we?
Maybe.
It's fine.
Maybe.
It's fine. It's like that cartoon with the dog and everything's burning and you just keep going, it's fine. This is fine. This is okay. Whatever. Whatever. So, season 3.
Season 3. What are we excited in season 3 about? What are we going to have this season?
So we've got a couple of different things planned. We've got some people planned to talk with. We're going to do some, of course, we've got our Martha Stewart reads, call back to previous conversations.
Yeah.
So we'll be doing some more talk about academic jobs, academic job markets, because it's my favorite time of the year. Talking about switching positions when it's time to leave. So your Bet's book.
Yes.
She actually wrote a book on quitting,
Yes.
which I've read.
Yes.
In anticipation for that episode.
Yes.
So we're going to talk a little bit about. We're going to step outside of our comfort zone.
And talk about quitting.
Talk about quitting. Talk
Yeah.
about leaving academia, which are two different things. Because there's quitting
Oh,
and going elsewhere or
Yes,
doing other
which is
things.
also okay.
And then there's switching institutions, and what does that look like? How does that feel?
and I have a third one, borrowing from Annie Duke, is sometimes you do the small quits because in poker you have the small quits, you fold.
I don't know. I don't play poker.
Yeah, but you fold. And one of the things
fold
she
laundry.
talks about is when you play poker, the professional players fold about 80% of the time just after the first couple of cards. They're like, yeah, I'm out. This is not likely to turn out well, whereas amateurs tend to go forward with about 50% of the hands. So we can talk about, so what I'm saying is there's small quitting. That is, look at your projects and decide which projects, despite the fact that you've invested the last 3 years in, it's time to put them to bed. So there's small quitting as well. Committee quitting, jobs within the
Quiet
institution quitting. Not quiet quitting, noisy quitting like mine. I was department chair, I stepped down. That was a classic Annie Duke moment in playing the percentages. How likely it is to get better, how likely it is to not, and that's a moment where it becomes crystal clear, at least to me. Anyway,
so I mean, we've got some of our classics, but
yes,
new takes on them, ways that our thinking has evolved. Thinking about, I'm excited to talk about generalists and experts this season. Also thinking about continuing to talk about technology and how we can use technology to not drive ourselves crazy instead of using it to help us go crazy.
yeah.
We don't want that.
And we'll talk also a little bit, going back to the callbacks
Our
a little
reads.
bit. A little bit to applying for grad school and making your first steps in making choices and all of that. We'll recall some of the arguments we've made and talk about a few new ones. I have a few new takes based on the work I've been doing. So
I enjoy it. I enjoy new takes. I'm also excited about your takes on, we're going to talk about creative works.
Yeah.
At some point, this would be a creative work, and how to be a public intellectual as well as be, kind of more traditional
yeah,
research article.
exciting things happening.
So it's going to be good. It's going to be good. So we're looking forward to season 3 with y'all. And have a good start to the semester. Hopefully your summers have gone like guys and not like mine, where it's just kind of like, what am I doing? What's my name?
you did also spend a few weeks in Europe, and I did not. I spent a few days in Vegas. So
there is the Europe trip. That was a bright spot. If anyone sees my luggage, send it to me because no one seems to know where it is. But yeah, here's to season 3.
Season 3.
We're rolling.